A local history of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in the Hull and Grimsby area, 1844 to 1973. This is audio transcript, 3 of 9, year history, 1906 to 1915. The audio transcripts were compiled by Sharon Bolton and produced by Michael Pennington. The audio transcripts of this history are available in audio CD, MP3 and Windows Media Player formats. In order to obtain copies of these audio transcripts, or print versions of this history, available in Microsoft Word and Adobe PDF formats, please contact Sharon Bolton by email, at sharonmbolton@gmail.com. Year history: 1906. On Monday 2nd of April, Sunday school was reorganized, with sisters as presidency. Alice Jackson as president, with Isabella Widdowson and Danny Croft as counselors, and Alice Branson as secretary. Monthly meetings were still being held. In March, Elder Enoch Ludlow was made assistant in Sunday school. Elder Lawrence C. Layton and Elder Preston in MIA in June, and Harry Ram in Sunday school in October. Also in October, Brother George Jackson emigrated, and in December, Sister Frances Hume died aged 62. 1907. In January, the branch Sunday school was reorganized, with George H. Norman as superintendent, Harry Cross and Robert Lacey as assistants and Marion Barrett as secretary. In February, the 4-month-old baby of J.W. Rouse was buried in Heddon Road Cemetery. At a council meeting of the Grimsby Conference, President Irvin G. Elders Joseph Dean, Frederick F. Williams and B. F. Price, were assigned to labor in Hull branch. Elder Price was president of the MIA, with Harry Cross and Brother A. Macy as counselors. In March, Sunday school was again reorganized, with Elder Stoddard as superintendent. On April 10th, a social was given by the Hull branch saints in honor of Elders G. Price and Tovey, who were returning home, and a number of saints who were emigrating. President G. was presented with a gift of silverware. On April 14th, Grimsby Conference was held in Hull, with Sister Rumania Penrose attending the Relief Society meeting. Alice Jackson was about to emigrate, so the branch society was reorganized with Annie Crofts as president, with counselors Isabel Widdowson and Annie Weiner, with Lillian Thomas as secretary and Susan Scrost as treasurer. On the same morning, a baptismal service was held at the Turkish Baths on George Street, where 9 people were baptized and confirmed immediately afterwards. In May, MIA was reorganized with Elder Dean as president. Elder Brigo Macias was appointed branch president to replace Elder G. On Wednesday 24th of July, 40 attended the MIA meeting. Elder Dean was released on October 30th, and was replaced by Elder Smith. On September 14th, President Sears conducted the funeral service of the mother of Harry and Miles Pam. 1908. Grimsby Conference was held in Central Hall, Hull, on January 15th, when Elders Smith and Stoker reported their labors in Hull. President Sears was pleased with the way the saints were taking hold of the work, and strangers continued attending meetings. In Hull branch during the year, Elder Brigo Macias was released as branch president. On February 4th, Elder Willard and E. Stoddard were appointed. On February 25th, a farewell social was held for Elder Ira J. Stoker, when about 100 saints gathered together. On March 8th, Brother George H. Norman was released as Sunday school president and President Stoddard appointed, with Harry Cross and Harry Ram as assistants. A baptismal service was held on April 26th, when 8 converts were baptized by Elders Rose and Parker. 5 were from Gainsborough, 1 from Goole, and 2 from Hull. Another baptism was held on August 16th at the George Street Turkish Baths in Hull. 3 from Hull and 1 from Beverley were baptized. Confirmations took place at the afternoon service. In September, Harry Cross was ordained a priest, and was the MIA president, with Elder Brown as counselor in November. On November 22, two good meetings were held in Foresters Hall, with President Stoddard and 7 travelling elders of the Grimsby Conference. 2 more baptismal services were held in December, with 2 people being baptized on each occasion. 1909. On February 28, Elder Bennett was made president of the Grimsby Conference, and on March 2, when President Stoddard was released as Hull Branch President, Elder Bennett succeeded him. A social was held on March 10, to say farewell to President Stoddard, who had served 27 months in the mission field. The following Sunday, a branch reorganization took place, with officers in Sunday School, Relief Society and MIA being changed. On Sunday, March 28, the elders of the branch started a class in which they could develop speaking by correcting each other. Baptismal services were held on May 30, when Elders Lowe and Giles baptized 5 people, and on September 26, when Elder Fairborn baptized 4 people. In October, it was reported that the public library had accepted a Book of Mormon. 2 farewell socials were held, the first for Elder Charles Jones on August 3, and for President Frank T. Bennett on November 3, which was held in Foresters Hall. He was released on December 7, and was succeeded as branch president by Elder Frederick W. Giles. In Hull Branch Sunday School, the superintendent was changed several times. On March 14, Elder Lowe was sustained. On May 30, Elder King. On November 14, Elder Booth, the latter to replace someone who had died. 1910. Quoting from the record for Sunday 2nd of March, on June 20, 1868, the Hull Conference was amalgamated with the Leeds Conference, and from this date up to 1900, it so remained part of. However, there was no branch organization at Hull, although for several years, the conferences were held at Hull. On September 16, 1900, the Grimsby Conference was organized, with Moroni Moss as president. The Hull district was part of this conference, but at this time the name of the Grimsby Conference was changed to Hull Conference. On Sunday, March 20, the late Grimsby Conference was held in the lecture hall at Kingston Square in Hull, attended by President Charles W. Penrose of the European Mission. Also present were Elder D. Ray Shirtliff of the Liverpool office, President and Sister E. Horsley of the Leeds Conference, President E. Cornwall and Elder R. Preeter of the Newcastle Conference, Elder W. Allen of the Birmingham Conference and President Frederick W. Giles, and 15 traveling elders. The service commenced at 10:30 in the morning. Elder Eli A. Clayson reported the Grimsby branch to be in good condition and most of the saints were alive to their duties, attending meetings and paying their tithing. Elder K. Brown reported the York branch, which contained a number of very excellent members. Elder W. Freckleton reported the Gainsborough branch as being a fine organization with a number of active members. President Penrose addressed the congregation on the necessity of union, and forgiveness of each other that we might be forgiving of our faults. Elder John R. Watson was appointed clerk of the conference to succeed Thomas E. King. President King accepted his new position as president of the Hull branch and was appointed such on April 10. President Frederick W. Giles appreciated the support given to him, and reported the Hull branch as being in first-class condition. In Hull branch, the children gave a performance of songs and recitations to saints and friends, and on the 5th of January, they had tea and games. Another social was held in Foresters Hall on March 21, the proceeds from which went for the purchase of hymn books. On April 12, a farewell social was held for President Frederick Giles. Elder Thomas E. King was appointed branch president in his stead. During the spring, several elders were moved around the district. Elder Bigelow moved from Goole to Gainsborough to labor with Elder Booth. Elder Smith moved to Hull to labor with Elder England, and Elder McCann was sent to Grimsby. Elders Bailey and Loveland returned to Hull to report from Bridlington, and having completed their work there they went on to Goole. Elders Harris and Wilson completed their labors in Louth, and President King and Elder Wilson went to Barton to look for accommodation. Elder England was transferred to York. At conference in July, Elders Smith and Patrick were assigned to Selby, Elders Loveland and White to Driffield, and Elder Jones to Hull. Hull Branch Sunday School held an outing to Beverly Westwood in August, when about 85 people enjoyed themselves. In June, Harry Ram had been released as an assistant, and Brother Bushell sustained. A Bible class was also held in Foresters Hall in June. The semi-annual conference was held in the Lecture Hall, Kingston Square on September 25. At the priesthood meeting on the 24th, elders were assigned: Elder Harris to York, Elder Jones to Barton, Elder Booth to Hull, Elder Morn to Gainsborough and Elder Loveland to Grimsby. The conference was presided by President Rudger Clawson, of the European Mission with his wife, and President Clark of Newcastle Conference. President King and 14 traveling elders of Hull Conference also attended. During the day, a baptismal service was held in the George Street Turkish Baths when 4 new members were added to the church. The following evening, a social was held in Foresters Hall, the hall being full to capacity, to listen to an excellent program with games held later in the evening, with proceeds going to purchase books for Sunday school. More missionary moves were made in the autumn. Elder Bernard Berry arrived and was appointed to Driffield with Elder White. Elder Bailey was released from Hull, sailing with Elder Booth and his wife from Liverpool. Elders Homer J. Brown and Edward Williams arrived in Hull with Elders White and Parry, having completed their labours in Driffield, went to Market Raisin. Elder Brown went to Selby and Elder Smith to Hull. 1911. Movements continued over the new year. Elders White and Parry finished their work at Market Raisin and transferred to Caister. Elders Wilson and Patrick were assigned to Malton and Elders Brown and Jones to New Holland. After a month, Elders White and Parry moved from Caister to Grimsby. Elder Brown to Selby, Elder Bigler to Grimsby, Elders White and Holyoke to Hornsey and Elder Morn to Malton. President Thomas E. King was released as conference president and Hull Branch Sunday School superintendent to return home. The new conference president was Joseph S. McCann, who came to Hull from Grimsby. In February, a meeting was held in New Holland district by Elders Jones and Brown, and about 160 people attended. 2 weeks later, the elders returned to Hull having completed their work. Spring Conference was held on March 18 to the 19th, in the Lecture Hall, Kingston Square, with President Rudger Clawson, and Elder H.B. Clawson from Liverpool. President Ernest S. Horsley of Leeds. Elders Hatch and Harmon of Sheffield, Elder Joseph S. McCann, and 15 travelling elders of the Hull Conference. In the priesthood meeting, Elder Watson was released as conference clerk, and Elder Jones sustained. Elder Watson was moved to York, Elder England to Malton, Elders Patrick and White to Hull, and Elder Brown to Hornsey. Sacrament was administered and President McCann spoke on its importance. The labor and statistical reports for the past 6 months were read. Statistics at December 31, 1910, were 361 members, including 6 elders, 15 priests, 17 teachers, 16 deacons and 24 baptisms. With Thomas E. King as president, Elder William C. England reported on York and Elder D. Chester Loveland reported on Grimsby. In April, Joseph S. McCann was called to the London Conference and Elder Watson succeeded him, with Elder Bigler as Hull Branch President, and Elder Smith moved to Gainsborough. On Saturday 22nd of April, the elders in Grimsby were ushered off the streets by a crowd while attempting to hold an open-air service. No trouble was experienced elsewhere in the conference. Further missionary movements included Elders Homer J. Brown and T. Ray Bell to Hornsey, Joseph F. Holyoke and Alvin J. Sharp to Malton and Elder Parry to Hull, to become conference president. Elder Wilson was moved to York with Elder Oleson moving to Grimsby. Elder D. Verdon Shirtliff was transferred to South Africa. Elder White was assigned to the Malton district until tracting was completed. Elder Sharp then moved from Malton to Hull. Autumn Conference was again held in the lecture hall, with President Clawson presiding, and Joseph McCann of London Conference, Joel Richards of Liverpool Conference and 13 travelling elders. Hull branch President Bernard Parry was ill, and unable to attend. Elder Shirley P. Jones took charge of the conference in his stead. The day before conference, at a priesthood meeting, Elder Elmer W. Smith was assigned to York and Hiram B. Harris to Gainsborough. The elders of the conference assembled on December 1 at No. 1 College Street to celebrate Thanksgiving with turkey. At the end of the year, there were 370 members in the Hull Conference with 22 baptisms held during the year. 1912. In February, 2 missionaries were assigned to Withensea, Elders Murdoch and Kidd. They were transferred to Grimsby in March, after being mobbed. The next week, President Bernard Parry and 8 other elders went to Withensea and held a most spirited and successful meeting. About 1,000 people were present, including a Church of England vicar, who tried in vain to corner us on our belief. Other missionary assignments were Elder William H. White Jr. to Gainsborough, Joseph F. Holyoake to Hull, and later to Grimsby, and Elders Sharp and Barlow to Hull. Elders Elmer W. Smith and Hiram B. Harris were released to return home. Elder Brown was appointed Hull branch president. The spring conference was held on April 21 with President Clawson and President Parry with 13 elders of the Hull Conference, and 150 people attended the afternoon session, and 220 in the evening. On Whit Monday, a party of saints was invited to Withensea for the day, a very friendly occasion in contrast to the events of a few months ago. Farewell socials were held for several elders returning home, including Shirley P. Jones, who had been conference clerk, William T. Patrick, William H. White, Charles A. Walters and Edward Williams, who was released because his baby had died. The autumn conference was held on September 29, with President Clawson, and conducted by President Parry. Also present were Ezra T. Benson, Elder Brown from Nottingham and Elder Bryan from Bristol Conference. The conference was preceded on Saturday by a social in Foresters Hall, when President Clawson and Ezra T. Benson of the Liverpool office were present. A Hull district meeting was held previously in August, when general and local officers were sustained, presented by President Parry. Elder Homer Barry was in charge, and Elders Holyoake, Williams, Bell and Olson took part in the program. The branch president was changed a number of times during the autumn. In October it was Homer J. Brown, in November it was Bernard Parry, but later in the month was Homer J. Brown again. Both Elders Brown and Parry returned home at the end of the month, when a social was held in their honor, tea being served by Sister Smith and Mrs. Barrett and Collins. At a priesthood meeting on November 28, Elder Joseph F. Olson was appointed conference president. Elder E. A. Lemon became clerk to the conference to succeed Elder Olson, with Elder T. Ray Bell as presiding elder of Hull branch. Elder D. T. Murdoch was appointed presiding elder over the Gainsborough branch. Elder Thomas E. Kidd moved from Beverley to Gainsborough. Elder Alex Orgill was assigned to Beverley to labor with Elder George B. Harding. On Sunday 22 December, Grace Collins and Marion Barrett were baptized by President Olson. Statistically, Hull Conference had 373 members including 5 elders, 14 priests, 20 teachers, 15 deacons, and there had been 26 baptisms during the year. 1913. The district meeting in Hull, when local and general authorities were sustained, was on March 23. Hull Conference President John F. Olson presided, and Douglas T. Murdoch, Hull Branch President, spoke. He had been moved to Hull when Elder Bell was released to accompany home the body of Elder Hendrick, formerly of the Newcastle Conference. The annual Hull Conference was held in the Lecture Hall, Kingston Square, on April 6. Elder Ezra Taft Benson, of the Liverpool office, was present. There was a sacrament meeting in the afternoon, and a priesthood meeting on Saturday evening. There was also a baptismal service, when 2 people were baptized by Elder Murdoch. The following Tuesday a social was held in Foresters Hall. About 80 members and friends had an enjoyable time together. The following week, a genealogy class was held in Hull, conducted by President Olsen. 18 were present. On May 6th, a social was held in honor of Brother Harry Cross, who was emigrating to Zion. He was released as Assistant Sunday School Superintendent, and was succeeded by Brother G. H. Norman. Missionary movements during the year included Elder Orgill to New York, with Elder Kidd, and Elder Bradshaw to Gainsborough. In June, President Olsen, Elders Murdoch, and Lemon, went to Driffield to conduct the funeral service for Brother William Glass. When President Olsen was released, the conference clerk, Elder Lemon, was appointed to succeed him. He went to a general convention in London in September. In July, a street meeting was held on the Bank Square, Hull, but it was stopped by a request of the police. A good crowd had gathered. However, street meetings continued. In October, the Hull Semi-Annual Conference was held, with President Hiram Smith of the European Mission and President Lemon conducted the meetings. The district meeting was in September, with 2 sessions, followed by a successful street meeting. Business included in the release of Joseph Cross as mutual counselor, and the sustaining of Robert Summers in his stead. Brother Cross was leaving for his home in Idaho. The branch president was Elder George Harding, who was succeeded in November by Elder Alfred Crane. Elder L.J. Bradford was sustained as Sunday School Superintendent. The priesthood meeting on October 18th, presided over by President Hiram B. Smith, was attended by Elder Fred R. Woolley of the Liverpool office, President Elias A. Lemon and 11 elders. Also present at the Sunday sessions was Sister Milton Jacob of the Sheffield Conference. On November 22nd, Elders Crane and Bradford returned to Hull having completed tracting in Beverley. The statistical report for the year showed the Hull Conference as having 363 members including 4 elders, 13 priests, 17 teachers, 13 deacons with 16 baptisms during the autumn. Elders Albert Spencer, William C. Smith and F. O. Vernon arrived while Elders Murdoch, Baker and Barlow returned home. 1914. In February, conference headquarters were moved from 24 Springbank to Fountain Street in Hull. Elders George B. Harding and W. C. Smith went from Hull to Scarborough, where they were doing some country tracting. They moved again in March, Elder Smith to York and Elder Harding to Grimsby. Annual conference was held on April the 12th. Conference President Elias A. Lemon presided, with Elder Arthur L. Beeley of the Liverpool office, Charles A. White and Frank Eastmond of Manchester, and Clyde Hayson of Leeds Conference also attending. The Hull branch president was Alfred Crane, who conducted a baptismal service in the afternoon. In May, President Lemon was released, and Elder Ray D. Nicholas sustained as conference president, with Virgil C. Hall as clerk. On Friday 26 June, it is recorded that King George and Queen Mary visited Hull. During the summer Elders Francis Vernon and Thomas Argyle went to Beverley for a few months. Franklin Wayman left Hull for Gainsborough. On August 6, all the elders were called in from the branches in order to sign up at the U.S. consul on account of the war. A telegram was sent to President Nichols, stating that all elders must sign up with the police in their different branches to secure their protection during the war. With these exceptions, life in the conference continued in much the same way as before. Hull district meeting was held on October 3rd. Sacrament was administered and the authorities sustained. Elder Crane reported on the branch, and Elder Hall on the Sunday school, as the superintendent George Norman was absent. On October 18th, the semi-annual conference was held, with Hiram M. Smith of the European Mission present, and Elders G. Merline Southwick of the Liverpool office. Clyde F. Hanson, Werner Arthur Bradder, Milton Bourne, Orson C. Parker and Lawrence Parker of the Sheffield Conference, Elders Louis B. Mohan and Marion Green of the Manchester Conference, and 14 travelling elders of the Hull Conference. A priesthood session was held on the Saturday, followed by a baptismal service in the Turkish baths, when 5 were baptized. There were 3 sessions on the Sunday. The day after conference, Elder Emma Lewis was transferred from Hull to York, and Elder Alex Orgill from York to Hull, from where he was released. In November, Relief Society in the Hull branch was reorganized, Fanny Dalton as president, with Sister William Bushell and Sister Mason as councillors and Gertrude Coates as secretary and treasurer. By the end of the year, there were 359 members in the conference, including 3 elders. 1915. The movement of elders continued, although none were sent out from Zion during the summer on account of the war. Virgil C. Hall became Hull Conference president, and Floyd W. Nielsen the secretary. Elders Smith and Parsi went from Gainsborough to Grimsby to join Elders Vance and Vernon. In February, a cottage meeting was held at Driffield by 3 elders and 15 investigators were present. On March 7, district meetings were held in Foresters Hall. President Nichols was in charge. Elder Crane reported on the branch, George Norman on Sunday School, and Robert H. Summers on Mutual. On the 29th of June, 4 elders arrived from Leeds to visit Hull, and also to see the damage done by a German Zeppelin raid on the city. Elders Argyle and Nielsen were escorting them around, and while they were looking at the ruins, they were arrested by a policeman for not having their passports. They were taken to a police station, but after being identified they were turned loose. The Hull Branch Relief Society was reorganized in May, with Rose Bushell as president, Sisters Norman and Mason as councillors and Gertrude Coates as secretary. The Sunday School was changed in August, with Elder Nielsen as superintendent with William Bushell and Brother Hanson as assistants. In November, Elder Horace O. Hall was sustained as branch president, and also president of the Mutual. In October, the Hull Semi-Annual Conference was held, with Elder James Jogal of the Liverpool office presiding. Also present were John A. Mains and his wife and daughter of London Conference, President Virgil Hall and 8 elders of Hull Conference. In December, President Hall was released, and Thomas Argyle appointed president of Hull Conference. On the statistical report, there were now 340 members including 2 elders, with 21 baptisms during the year. A report was also made on Relief Society, showing that 4 were organized being Hull, Grimsby, York and Gainsborough with 63 members enrolled and average attendance of 36. This concludes audio transcript, 3 of 9, of a local history of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in the Hull and Grimsby area, 1844 to 1973.